Welcome back to Something Good in the Kitchen. I hope you're doing well, and thanks for joining me on this episode of Cooking with Thaddeus. Many people I talk to say they don't have time to make bread, or they're just not sure of the recipe. If you can carve out 5 minutes in your day to mix up the dough, form the loaf, put it in the oven, and take it out, you can make the most amazing fresh bread. It looks good, it smells good, and it tastes awesome. Join me on this next video to learn how easy it is to make time for fresh bread. The classic bread recipe has 4 ingredients: flour, water, yeast, and salt. That's it. You just have to decide if you want to make a small, medium, or large loaf. So let's put this recipe together. You can do this all in less than 5 minutes. Set your timer, ready, set, go. This bread method is a wet mix. The first step is to measure your lukewarm water. 1 cup for small, 1.5 cups for medium, or 2 cups for a large loaf. I'm going to make a medium-sized loaf in this video. Put this water in a medium-sized stainless steel or Pyrex bowl. The second step is to add the yeast. Active, dry, instant, or bread machine yeast will do. 1 teaspoon for small, 1.5 teaspoons for medium, or 2 teaspoons for a large. Next, add the salt. 1 teaspoon for small, 1.5 for medium, and 2 teaspoons for a large loaf. Whisk to mix all these ingredients. The last step is to add the flour, 1 cup at a time. Use 2 cups for small, 3 cups for medium, and 4 cups for a large loaf. The classic bread recipe has a ratio of 5 parts flour to 3 parts water. I like a bread that has a little less flour. Mix thoroughly after each 1 cup addition of flour. When you see the dough begin to pull away from the sides of the bowl, you will know you're close. You may need to add a little more flour, 1/2 cup or 1/4 cup at the end. Form the dough into a ball and cover the bowl with a top from a cooking pot. You can use plastic wrap or even a moist kitchen towel. All done. How did you do for time? Hopefully less than 5 minutes. Now for the wait time. You have time to run some errands, take a nap, or whatever else you may be doing in your busy day. You also need to make a decision about the type of bread you want. If you want an artisan style bread with a nice crust and a chewier, more developed crumb in the center, then you can just leave the dough to mature on your counter overnight. If you want to eat the bread the same day, you can let the dough double in size in a warm part of your kitchen. While you're waiting, check out the link to my video, What Type of Bread to Make, in the description below. Yeast need 1 to 2 hours to help the dough rise. If you want to speed up the rising, you can proof the dough in a warm oven. Simply turn your oven on to its lowest setting, bake, usually around 170 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. When the oven reaches this temperature, turn it off. Keep the door ajar for 5 to 10 minutes to cool slightly. You can then set the dough in the oven to rise with the door shut. You have yourself a nice warming proofing oven. The last step is forming the loaf. When the dough is doubled in size, just punch down the dough and form it into a tight ball. Stretch and tuck the dough under itself several times to form the loaf. Sometimes getting your hands moist with water helps with shaping the loaf. You may need to add 1/4 to 1/2 cup of flour to the artisan style loaf. You can let the dough rise again for 20 to 30 minutes in the vessel you're going to cook the bread. You can use a classic loaf pan. Grease this with butter first. Or you can use a pizza stone, a baking sheet, a cast iron Dutch oven, or a similar deep pan with a top. If you want to take your loaves to the next level, check out the bread Cloche that makes an awesome crusty loaf every time. They're expensive, but worth every penny. I've had this one for 15 years and used over 1,000 times. There's a link in the description below. While the loaf is rising again, you can preheat your oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the dough has risen again, just before cooking the loaf, you can use a serrated knife to cut 3 expansion slits in the loaf top. Then pop the loaf in the oven and cook for 35 minutes. After 35 minutes, remove the top. Careful, there will be a lot of steam. And set the timer for 5 to 10 minutes more depending on how brown you want the crust. When the bread is done, you can test the internal temp of the bread. It should be a minimum of 190 degrees Fahrenheit. It might be as high as 212, that's okay. I have put a link to my favorite instant read thermometer in the description below. I've had this thermometer for over 10 years. Let the bread cool for 10 minutes in the pan out of the oven. You might even hear the crust cracking as it cools. Let the bread cool for at least 30 minutes before slicing and resist the urge to cut into the bread too early as it's still firming up. Check out some of my other videos on toppings for fresh bread in the description below. I'm going to try this bread with butter and some fresh honey. My mom sent me this honey from the Matanuska Valley in Alaska. Check it out. My kids both said it was the most amazing honey ever. There's a link in the description below. If you have this basic recipe down, try some variations. Maybe you'll try your hand at pane toscano, bread without salt, or try some chopped fresh rosemary or Kalamata olives in the initial dough. Experiment, have some fun, and enjoy. Thanks for joining me on Something Good in the Kitchen. And remember, make time for fresh bread.